Good evening, everyone. Hi, American fellow. Today we are doing a live stream coming back with the group of university students, and we would like to present to you the very two petition which is very important to stop China illegal very quick, but we will talk more about that. Um, let's begin with the petition of Hoàng Sa Trường Sa is belong to Vietnam. Let's I'm sorry. In the English name, it is Spratly and Paracel belong to Vietnam. As you all know that the China uh, uh, expansions that they use the islands that belong to the five countries. As you can see on the screen, the Paracel Islands and the Spratly Island that belong to Vietnam, as they have signed in an international conference back in March 2nd, the 2nd of March 1973, um, that they declare that they solemnly respect the boundary of Vietnam. Um, and that at that time, the conference was joined by 12 countries. However, as of today, as we all know that since 2011, China has started building those illegal expansions on those islands and make military base on it. Therefore, there are petitions to have a conference, an international, to reconvene an international conference on Vietnam to stop China from that expansion. So please bear with me. Thank you for watching, and I will be right back. However, I would like to introduce with you today, um, with us in the live stream today is Steve, Brandon, and Sunny Maria. Hi, Sunny, and hi, Steve.
Hi,
Hello.
Lisa. Thanks for having us back again. It's our pleasure to be back and to talk about today's topic.
Yeah, good to hear from you, Steve, too.
Okay, so as I talk to you about Spratly and Paracel Island, what do you think the topic today that you would like to talk about?
So today we're actually going to be talking about China's One Belt One Road initiative, and I mean, thinking about what you just said regarding the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands, I think it's quite similar to the Belt and Road Initiative in the sense that China is encroaching the territories of these other countries, right? So, of course, as we know with the Spratly and Paracel Islands, as we discussed in the video that we did maybe like around 2 weeks ago, they illegally occupied these islands through means of force or through oppression of Vietnam. And in the Belt and Road Initiative, it's quite a simple thing, and we'll understand this a lot more as we go through the presentation.
Wow, very interesting.
Mhm.
So, okay, so let's begin with uh, China Belt and Road Initiative.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay.
So, what do you think, Sunny? What, in your opinions, what do you think about the topic today?
Yeah, I'm excited for us to talk more about it and then also to let others know about how they can help by signing the petitions and seeing like what the petitions they are that they're signing and that they can actually make a difference in these people's lives.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Yeah, sounds good. We can go further into the petitions later on and explain why we need to do this petition. However, it
Right, right.
with yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, Steve, you can tell us more about the China's Belt and Road. What
Right.
what
So,
your research?
so the Belt and Road Initiative was basically started back in 2013, right? Um, and the Chinese Communist government developed an international development strategy, right? And the strategy aimed to accelerate the economic growth across the Asia Pacific, Africa, and Central and Eastern Europe. And like just to give a bit of background regarding the One Belt One Road initiative, so it is focused on like investing and developing the infrastructure of nearly 70 countries through international organizations or through direct funding towards their federal government or through releasing contracts that private companies could bid for. Um, and the initiative deals with creating and establishing an oversea and overland trading route, right? So of course, when we talk about this oversea trading route, I'm certain that, a few years down the road, a few decades down the road, Spratly and Paracel Islands are going to be extremely important in that initiative. And, obviously in order to do this, they need to pass through, basically every country between China and Western Europe. Because again, like we're talking about the easternmost parts of China trading with Central European countries. And in order to achieve this, China requires two main things. Of course, first, getting their neighboring countries to invest in railroads, which is a huge point of consideration when it comes to the One Belt, One Road initiative. And in many times, like the initiative to develop and invest in these railroads are actually forced upon other countries. And the second main thing that China needs is to secure relevant key ports in particular countries. And later on, we'll talk about Sri Lanka and how they had to give their port to China for 99 years. So essentially, in hindsight, it may seem like a great thing to do. It seems like a great initiative when you look at it on paper, especially since China is advertising it as a bid to enhance regional connectivity and embrace a brighter future. And for a lot of countries, this may give the appearance of China opening up its doors. Finally, after tens of decades, after a century of being a self-isolated country, they're opening up their doors to the world. They're breaking down their barriers, and like we want to be here to assure you that like this is actually not the case. China is not by any means trying to open up its doors. They're not trying to break down any barriers. If anything, they're trying to enforce it. But they're doing it in such a way that is very subtle. And these neighboring countries don't really realize what's happening. But I'm certain that the international community and members of the Western world, living in United States or maybe in Canada or Western Europe, I'm sure a lot of people are oblivious regarding this. And if anything, China is taking this opportunity to politically and economically enforce itself in countries that haven't really experienced what it means to be under this communist regime. Of course, we know countries such as Vietnam know exactly what it means to be under China. And we have talked and we have seen the effects that it has on the Vietnamese people. And of course, we're going to talk about that later on a bit more when we talk about the petitions that we'd like to invite everyone to sign. And, initially, when China had proposed this Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of people were interested. They were glad that they could be part of this economic initiative. And, looking at it face value, like I said earlier, I mean, like, who wouldn't be, right? China, which was a country that was closed off for decades and grew to become like the world's economic powerhouse, is now inviting all these nations to unite and form a unified market that supports locally based industries and promotes the spread of like cultural ideas and integration. And a lot of countries were, willing to invest their time and financial assets because, they truly believed that they would be able to make up for it in the long run. And it's crazy for me to think about because here you are affecting nearly 70 countries and international organizations altogether. And that's thinking about it in terms of how many people are being affected, that's an incredible amount, right? And what they couldn't predict, what these countries, these investors, these organizations, what they couldn't predict was that China would take all the opportunities to center themselves, to center things around themselves. And of course, why wouldn't China do this? China's only reason for doing this, for doing the Belt and Road Initiative, is to make money and to control
Yeah.
all other countries that would be like foolish enough to comply with their terms and conditions, right? And to prove what I just said, take a moment and listen to this. Because like a few years after its launch, Xi Jinping, the man at the forefront of this Belt and Road Initiative, of course, like the president of China, went out of his way to tell media outlets. And, when I heard this, it blew my mind to see how open and how direct he was being. But he told the media people that, it's time for other countries to learn and adopt the Chinese wisdom and the Chinese approach, you know?
Wow.
And this is, I mean, if you heard what I said earlier, this is completely opposite of what they were advocating for. China was, when they pitched this in 2013, China said, we want to create cultural integration. We want to celebrate cultural and traditional diversity. But now, Xi Jinping is coming out to the media outlets and they're saying, no, like, it's time for all these countries to do it one way. It's time for these
Yeah.
countries to do it the Chinese way. And the only way that we should be doing it, the only way we should be approaching
It's
what we're doing
Chinese
in the
way.
future is exactly the Chinese approach, right?
Yeah.
And this is like clearly seen when the communist government goes out of its way, goes on to say that they want to have political stability in the region.
Yeah.
And of course, when they're talking about political stability, this stability would be enforced and kept by China, right?
Yeah.
And this is done in three main ways. Okay, so China wants to enforce and maintain political stability through them in using three main ways. So first, you have countries that are seeking for Chinese investments. You know,
Mm-hmm.
investments in order to comply with necessary infrastructures. So, of course, when we're talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, the most important things are railroads and ports, and you need to have developed highways. Those are all, key major infrastructural um, projects that need to be done, right?
Yeah.
And the communist government gives these countries the money and the resources necessary as long as they promise to do certain things. And this brings us to the second point. So
Mm-hmm.
China ends up requiring countries to allow over 60 to 80% of workers in major projects to be Han Chinese.
Yeah.
So a lot of the issues when it comes to these projects is the fact that local people are not able
Mm-hmm.
to find work because the people who are coming to work on these projects, they're all
Mm-hmm.
Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
right? And be
Mhm.
mindful of the fact that I said Han Chinese and not just Chinese in general. It's because the Hans are the most traditionally and culturally Chinese individuals. They are the Eastern Chinese people. They are not like the quote unquote Chinese Tibetans or the Muslims
Mm-hmm.
that are being oppressed. And lastly, they know that these countries can't afford to pay them back when the payments are due. And the Chinese
Exactly.
government,
Yeah.
the
This is a scam.
exactly, the Chinese government expects this when they're giving out the loans to these countries. That's why they're so willing to lend out massive amounts of money at a time. And this has led to a few instances wherein China has
And
taxed
they,
more
yeah,
valuable
I know
goods.
some case they even make people to not be able to pay.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's
And
a that's a trick. Yeah.
and a lot of times they inflate the value and the costs of the projects that they're doing, right? So
Yeah.
that the country would have no way of paying it back on time. And like this is evident in Sri Lanka when they agreed to lease like one of the largest ports in the country to
Yeah.
China for 99 years.
Yeah.
So now China has control over around I believe 90% of that port. It started back in 2013, if I'm not wrong, and they will have basically full control of that port for 99 years, and there's nothing that Sri Lanka can do about it because it's legally binded.
Mhm.
99
So
years is a long time. Yeah.
exactly.
Three,
So
at least 3 or 4 generation, and they
mhm,
even affect the people and
right.
so on. Yeah.
Hmm. So now you have, China controlling the terms and conditions, the masses of people that they're sending over, and they're even controlling the strategic land that makes them, millions on top of millions of dollars a month, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
And a simpler and clearer way to put all of this was actually summarized in an article that I read recently. I won't release its names for safety reasons, but it said, unlike US foreign aid or the Marshall Plan to rebuild economies after World War II, the Belt and Road Initiative is a Chinese investment that expects a return. Chinese financial institutions lend money for BRI projects in partner countries, and the construction contracts are awarded to mostly Chinese firms. A Chinese company thus receives much of the proceeds of the loan, but the host country has got the debt. If the return on investment isn't sufficient to pay off the debt, China will repossess the project and it becomes a debt for equity swap, meaning that China basically is like sneakily taking control and allowing other countries to go into debt because of this.
And that's like, if you reading this again, like hearing you say this, it blows my mind because China is giving these countries the loans,
Hmm.
and the
It's
loans,
happening in Vietnam the same too. Right
yeah,
now, they are trying to build a one it called like a highway speed
uh-huh,
train, which is going from the north to the south. Like it's
mhm.
like a spied road of Vietnam, so that and it awarded to China as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is we are very very concerned about that.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have great concern about it.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
sorry for interruption. Please
oh,
go on.
no worries at all, Lisa. And that's where the crazy thing is because, I'm pretty sure Vietnam, to develop this railroad system, they are relying on Chinese loans, right? And in order,
Exactly.
and you just said that the Chinese company won the bidding in order to construct this. So now Vietnam gets the money, and now Vietnam is paying China to do this work.
Yeah,
So at the end of
that's
the day, it
exactly.
all goes back to China, you know?
Yeah,
And the country
and they
receiving
can
the
jack
loan,
up the price as well. So, for
exactly.
example, at the beginning, they may sign a contract with, let's say, they sign a contract with that is uh, 100 millions. There was a
Hmm.
time that they signed for 10 millions, but then they
Hmm.
jack it up like to 100 million, 10 times
Right.
or 20 times easily. And then
Hmm.
no control over it because they bought the government.
Right.
Yeah, they paid they pay under table money, so the government have their monies, or they may trick them into something, and they somehow they control them so that they
Hmm.
only award it to Chinese contracts to Chinese
Right.
people, and like do everything in favor of China instead of defend for our own country. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And that's exactly it. I mean, China is just seeking to gain as much as it can, right?
Yeah.
And while, what I'm about to say is like pretty blunt, I mean, I truly believe in it. The fact that the Chinese Communist government doesn't care about anyone else's being aside for itself. They don't care if Vietnam is going to do okay. They don't care if Sri Lanka is going to do okay. If all their neighboring countries, Cambodia, will do okay. Um, as long as they're doing the best and they're able to gain and to grow, you know, they don't care if a country loses its culture and tradition or goes bankrupt or dies off. In fact, I'm even willing to say that they want this to happen, right? If a
Mm-hmm.
country loses all power and hope to govern and maintain itself, then it makes it eh, so much easier for the communist government to swoop in and repossess the country or to install, political agents in there. And the communist government wants to see the world fail, amidst its own prosperity.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I would
Mhm.
like to add into this part. Besides this, China also make people to use Huawei system, which is a 5G system, so that
Mhm.
they can control their internet, and they can collect the people data, and they manipulate and use it in a very evil way.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah. So Yeah, that is very scary. That so that they once they control the internet, they control the country's securities and the country's secret.
Right.
Uh, they control the country's financials, the country transportations and independence and so forth. Then that means
Mm-hmm.
that country belong to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's why I know in North America, I'm pretty sure the US and Canada have been trying to battle a lot against Huawei and trying to make sure that it doesn't come into their country. But I'm not sure how that fight is going.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Mhm. But yeah, like another criticism against, China's initiative and another set of facts that will hopefully, allow all of our viewers to understand China's selfishness amidst, this whole initiative. It revolves around the fact that the execution of projects have been done, under extremely poor standards and poor management. It's clear that the expenditures and the investments since 2013 have been, nothing short of wasteful. And one reason for these conditions is due to the fact that the Chinese teams that are in charge of managing projects in other countries, they have a no government intervention policy. So again, no government intervention policy that allows them to do things as they want to. So that means
Wow.
the government isn't able to monitor their expenditures. The government isn't able to monitor how much resources there is actually needed, and everything falls under this Chinese company in order to do everything and to state the prices. That's why they're able to get away with inflating, you know, how much these projects cost.
Mm-hmm.
And these other countries, they can't do anything because they're so much weaker than China is, and no one is speaking up against them. No one is standing for them. So they can't do anything but sit back and take it, right? And
Yeah.
many times we've seen that the projects under the Chinese supervision, they haven't been carefully planned out. And based on articles and independent studies, it's really evident that this is due to poor management and China's desire to prolong it. When I talk about prolonging it, I'm talking about prolonging the project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And have the partner country, incur as much debt as it can.
Yeah.
Honestly, if they were making false claims of necessary materials, then I wouldn't even be surprised. I expect them to be making these false claims.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like it's undeniable that projects costs have been, hyperinflated. And like we've been talking about it for a while now. And honestly, I wouldn't even be surprised if they were making false claims in terms of how much manpower they needed, how much materials, how much building equipment, and all this to make sure that more Chinese come into the country, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah.
Mhm.
Not only that, I from Vietnam experience, that what I learned from, they allowed to do whatever they want along with the land that they are going to build the railroad. So they bring along the hands Chinese people, and they live along their families and so forth, and they live along that, and that's a huge number. And they could be
Mhm.
soldier who you never know. It affects the securities of the countries. And
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
not only that, that they can bury something underneath the railroad, you never know. At a certain time, they can, let's say if they bury something that explosive or something like that, you can't control, you don't know. Because
Mhm.
everything is almost in their hand, no government intervention.
Right.
Yeah.
That is, yeah, that is deeply, that is a deeply, is a very, very uh, heavy concern for us in regard to the government let the Chinese people to the government, the Vietnamese government let the Chinese government freely do what they want on our own country.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that the same for every country that build this rail and road,
Mhm.
this railroad, all of these definitely are these, people are weak in terms of management or governments and so forth, and be corrupted or something, then
Right.
it happened the same to them as well. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So So thank you. So um, so should I go to present to you too about the petition?
Well, I think that we should talk a little bit more about the conditions of the Chinese. And of course,
Okay.
these conditions resulted in extremely negative experiences for countries that have been hosting Chinese investors and Chinese projects. Very vaguely, a report said that this lack of planning and commitment by Chinese authorities have led to extremely expensive political and financial changes surrounding the projects. To list a few more issues that people have been experiencing, there's been a lack of stakeholder engagement, meaning like they haven't been contacting those who actually have stakes in hold, such as independent investors. And like we mentioned earlier, there's a failure or a lack of desire to hire local workers, meaning that the local government economy will be decreased. And then there's also difficulty in bidding for contracts because of all this. So taking all of these things into account, what China has been doing versus what it had proposed nearly 7 years versus what it's been doing nearly 7 years ago is completely opposite. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
and like talking about like how it's completely opposite. It's I I wouldn't even know how China could, defend itself against like these accusations, right? Because here you are, looking back at these documents or these articles that China released in conferences, international conferences, 7 years ago, they're talking about how, they want to have this union with these other countries. They want to create, you know, intercultural relationships, intertraditional relationships. They want to be able to share cultures and share traditions. And they haven't been able to do anything regarding that. You know,
Hmm.
every single thing that they've been doing, okay, lack of stakeholder engagement, okay, like they don't care about the local people who are investing in these projects. They don't want local workers to mingle with their Chinese workers. Anything much
Wow.
better, they want their Chinese workers to build communities in these areas. They want the Chinese workers to settle here so that they could create their own Chinese community and hopefully spread their own culture and tradition throughout the region, right? And the difficulty in bidding for contracts, that just means they don't care about the countries. They don't care about possibly
I
giving.
can hardly hear you from my end. Sorry.
Oh, hello.
Oh,
Hi.
I can hear.
Okay. But yeah, the difficulty in these bidding for contracts, it's you
This
take all
is
this into
serious. Very
yeah,
serious.
you take this all into consideration and you realize China has been lying to the world, has been
This is
lying
a
to the country.
silent invasion.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And no one is talking about this. No one has. I've been watching news for quite a while now, and I I haven't seen the Belt and Road Initiative brought up for a few years now.
Wow.
So
Uh-huh.
obviously, you know, they're trying to keep something from the world,
Yeah.
and they
And
don't
the
want people to be knowing all this, right?
yeah, exactly. And the people who will be most affected are the citizens who are like seeing a lack of economy or a lack of jobs, and their livelihoods are being impacted by this. And it's like honestly a very smart but very sneaky way to
Right.
take over. Yeah, it's really sad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They
And
use the trust of people to take advantage. They take advantage of the trust is from people. Like
right.
I think the people on this side don't understand how communist is.
Mm-hmm.
They very cheating. They like
Right.
very lying and
Mm-hmm.
more
Uh-huh.
immoral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's sad because the people who are being affected, like, they don't know how they can be like fighting against it. Like
Exactly.
most of the time, it's most of the citizens they don't have like maybe like university degree or like
Mm-hmm.
higher education to see like
Mm-hmm.
how they can be fighting against it, how they can be increasing their economy, and that's like
Right.
the saddest part.
Mm-hmm. And these are all things that Vietnam has experienced as well. Prior to the start of this Belt and Road Initiative, falling prey to China's false promises, leading to political and economic oppression. And this has brought the Vietnamese people like religious, cultural, and traditional oppression, using them as guinea pigs in order to test, for Chinese experiments and projects. And I know we talked about it a few videos or a few weeks ago in terms of the numerous human rights violations that China has had on Vietnam. And just listening to stories about it by other independent workers who are advocating against China and Vietnam. You hear about the organ trades that are happening. You hear about kidnapping children, ransoming, or even it's crazy to believe, but even like the consuming of human flesh, right?
Yeah.
And these are all things that we're hoping to discuss in the future, and we're hoping to talk about as we go on.
Yeah.
And that's why we'd like to invite all of our viewers, to sign a petition, to share this information with those that you care about, because this is an important, thing that we're doing. This is an important um, action that you can take in order to help to protect your loved ones, um, from potentially experiencing the same things that uh, these Asian countries are experiencing right now. You hear all these stories and you can't believe it, but once it starts happening to you, you know, you start to take for granted, oh, like, why didn't I do anything? Why didn't I say anything? And for the first petition, it's a petition to be submitted to the United Nations and other country leaders. And Lisa, would you be able to pronounce that
Sure.
for me?
Yeah. I can display this. Yeah. So the first petition that is the petition that we submitted to the White House. So to open the petition, you can just enter this word hipningparis.com that I have displayed on the previous presentation. So in here you can choose English if you prefer to. So you just click on English, and then right here it said click to sign the petition. So you just press on the click to sign. Very simple and easy. It only takes you about 1 or 2 minutes only. So right now we have a petition from Father Reverend Thanh Nguyen. He submitted on April 28, 2020. And because not many people know about it, so right now we only have about 3,097,000 signatures for to get 100,000 signatures to submit it to the White House. And this petition is to reconvene the Paris International Conference on Vietnam to resolve the conflicts in South China Sea. Basically, the idea is this: China is one of the signatories who signed the acts of the International Conference on Vietnam back in 1973, which they agree to respect the Vietnam's borders and the people's rights of self-determination of their governments. So in other words, that for the Vietnamese people to free to vote under the examination, under the observance of the United Nations. So that will free Vietnam from communists if people choose their own government. Secondly, that will stop China from taking over the Spratly and the Paracel Island, which both belong to Vietnam. And there is a lot of evidence on that, but also that China had signed the agreement that they recognize the border of Vietnam as of 1954, which is including the Spratly and the Paracel Island. Therefore, this petition is to submit it to be submitted to already submitted on April 28. We need 100,000 signatures, and that for the White House of United States. The second petition is to translate to English, it is Paracel Islands and Spratly Islands belong to Vietnam. This is, can you see the English letter underneath here? That's very small, tiny. But
Yeah, we can
That's
see
the
it.
meaning. Paracel Islands and Spratly Island belong to Vietnam. To sign these petitions, that you just need to roll it up. And basically, we could have the English version as well. So you just click on the English. But the meaning of this is saying that we request this country that has signed the agreement, the international conference, the act of the international conference that they signed on March 2nd of 1973 by the 12 countries, including Chinese, that they had to return the Spratly and the Paracel Island back to Vietnam. Therefore, these signatures will be submitted to the United Nations and other country leaders to sign this. Also, you can just fill in the first name, last name, and email, and then you click on sign. Very simple, and it only took you about 2 minutes. After you sign, you click on sign, there will be a letter that's sent to you asking you to certify your signatures. Once you certify your signatures, then your vote is counted. And we hope to achieve 100,000 signatures on this petition. So to summarize, we have 2 petitions, one for the United Nations officials and other country leaders, and second is petition to the White House, which is hiệp định paris.com. The other one is Hoàng Sa Trường Sa là của Vietnam.com. It's a little long, but I leave it on the screen. Hopefully, people concerned can help us to achieve the goal of 100,000 signatures as of now. Once we have 100,000 signatures, we will submit it to everybody, and especially to the White House. Then we will have a reply from the from the American President Donald Trump to reply to us within 60 days. And hopefully this will help to resolve and stop the expansion, the illegal expansion of China. Yeah. Thank you very much. I think the time is up, and the topic is very interesting, and the presentation is very well done. Thanks a lot for your research, Steve, Brandon, and Sunny Maria, for joining us with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Please help us to promote it to the universities and to the people you know, so that
of course,
we have more signatures. I also would like to note that the first petition, we don't put a date in. Right now, we wait until we have 100,000 signatures. So the first one have no date. Please have to promote it for us. The second one is quite hard. We have to be ended by May the 28th. But if by May the 28th, on the 28th, we'll have to restart from zero and go on until we be able to get 100,000 signatures. So, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, we'll make sure to spread the word.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for watching our presentation today, and hope that you can help us to sign the petition as well as to share and with other people, so that we can help each other to stop this illegal expansion. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, have a great evening. Thank you so much. Yeah, I will stop the live stream right